Section 5.4 has no new information in it. So woohoo! This is not going to be a very long video. I'm just going to summarize what it says. All this section does is, since factoring is so important to what you are going to do as you continue on, in this class, you're going to use factoring in pretty much the entire next unit. College algebra, we're doing stuff in college algebra now that requires factoring, and I don't have time to go back and review factoring. I want you to learn this well so that you don't get behind when you're in that class. So here is just a general factoring strategy. And that's the topic of section 5.4. It's just a summary of what we've seen, the different things that you know how to factor. Okay, so if I'm asking you to factor something, it's going to be one of these things. Okay, you don't know any more than this at this point. So when you encounter something, whether it's in my math lab on the homework or on the test when you take it on Tuesday, that's when our next test is. Okay, when you first look at a problem, here's what you should do. Use this as a checklist. Write it on a 3x5 card as you're going through and doing your homework. The first thing that we do, the first thing we talked about is there a common factor? You always want your numbers to be as small as they possibly can. I like smaller numbers when I'm doing my arithmetic. I'm sure you do too. So we take out a common factor, just like we did on that last problem in the previous section, the sum of cubes or difference of cubes. We factored out the 3. We want to do that when we can. That's always step 1. If there's a common factor, take it out. If there's not, then move on. The second step, we only know how to do a few things as far as factoring. The second step, you ask yourself, how many terms are there? We've talked about factoring things with 4 terms. We know one way to factor things with 4 terms. There's other things you could do. There's other types, but we're keeping things relaxed so far. We've factored things with 3 terms and some things with 2. So there's a different strategy for each. So first, if it has 4 terms, what do we do when something had 4 terms? How do we factor it? Grouping, yeah. 4 terms, use grouping. Remember, I've told you this a bunch of times. On your test that you take on Tuesday, everything's going to be factored. Okay, so if I've asked you to factor something, it's going to factor. So this strategy is going to work for everything. 3 terms. If it's a trinomial, well, there's actually 2 things that we did. It just depends on if we had the simple situation or the more complicated situation. Okay, the simple situation, if it had a 1 in front of the x squared, if we had a 1 in front of the x squared, all we did was unfoil it. We drew our parentheses and we looked at the first, we looked at the lasts, and made sure we had the right last for the middle term. So if there's a 1 in front of the x squared, what we did is we did unfoil it, is what I was calling that. I don't know if that's a great math term or not, but that's what we did. We just unfoiled it, unmultiplied. And then if there's some other number, if there's some other number in front of the x squared, like a 3 or a 9 or a 72, okay, well, this is where I said, if you came into this class with another way to factor, that is great. I really don't care. But if you came into this class and you did not know how to factor or you struggled with it, what I showed us was the grouping method. Since we'd already talked about grouping, I talked about the grouping method. If you don't like the grouping method, go on to YouTube. Google factoring trinomials. There's other ways, and people will show you. I just have a limited amount of time, so I showed you one way that works every time, no matter what. And then the last thing is there 2 terms? And if there's 2 terms, then it has to be, if it's going to be factorable, it has to be one of 2 things. If you've taken out the common factor and what's left is not one of these, you're done with the problem. You can't go any further. Okay, so either you have a difference of squares, or you have a sum or difference of cubes, which we just talked about for a few minutes in the last video or the last the last section. That's all you know how to factor. Okay, these are the categories. So if you get down to something with two terms, it's not a sum or a difference of squares, you're done with the problem. And then the very last thing is just to make sure that you've looked and seen that everything is factored completely. That you've taken out the whole entire common factor, that if you remember last class, we factored the difference of squares and we did that. The result was there was another difference of squares there. So just make sure you take everything to the end. And that's it. That's section 5.4. This is 5.4.
Okay.
This is it. All 5.4 is when you go into your homework, it's just some extra factoring practice. It's another opportunity for a quiz so that you can get a great quiz grade. Remember, take those quizzes. We're getting closer and closer to the end. Okay, and I want that quiz grade. It breaks my heart when I have to put in a quiz grade that is not an A or a B. Okay, if you've not taken quizzes and you got a 50 on the quiz grade, I do not like to do that. So please take them. Yes.
Not count the lunch break.
On your tests, you have, in this class,